It's awesome to be here at this year's Young Jewish Leadership Summit with TPUSA. At this summit last year, I spoke about the rise of anti-Semitism in the US and how we need to change our attitude as Jews in order to fight it. Because, as we all know, being Jewish in the United States is getting harder each year, let alone what's happening in Israel and across the world. And for far too long, a lot of people have accepted the label of victim, instead of fighting to defend the rights of American Jews to be just that, Jewish in America. It's a fight that we all need to face, whether we like it or not, and in many ways, it's a fight we're losing. So today I want to share some bits of my toolkit for how to fight anti-Semitism. And to fight anti-Semitism, we first need to fully understand it. What most Americans are told, and at least what most Americans believe about anti-Semitism, is usually either completely wrong or misses a big part of the picture. But the reality is that anti-Semitism comes in many forms, and we need everyone, not just us, everyone to understand these forms. So there are a bunch of types of anti-Semitism that most people are at least aware of. There's traditional religious anti-Semitism, which stems from the historic religious belief and stereotype about Jews. That's the basis of anti-Semitism across Europe for centuries. It's what drove the murder and expulsion of Jews from basically every single European country. It's what drove the murder of Jews during the Crusades. It's what sparked the label of Jews as Christ killers. There's racial anti-Semitism, which came about really in the 19th century based on the pseudo-scientific idea that Jews are a distinct race. With that came more derogatory stereotypes, combined with the old idea that Jews posed a threat, this time to the purity of other races. This formed a large part of the ideology that underpinned the Holocaust. There's political anti-Semitism, where Jews are blamed for societal problems, economic challenges, political unrest. Political anti-Semitism really explodes into an almost endless list of more stereotypes and conspiracy theories, with Jews being labeled as wealthy, greedy, power-hungry. Based on these tropes, we control banking, governments, entertainment, the weather. If that was true, we're really not very good at it. My bank account needs a few more zeros before I believe that one. Then there's types of anti-Semitism that really aren't as black and white, but are just as dangerous. There's Holocaust denial, in which the Holocaust is downplayed or completely denied. There's online and digital anti-Semitism, with the internet and particularly social media becoming a breeding ground for anti-Semitism of all kinds. Then there's what I call casual anti-Semitism. That's often unintentional. This is when anti-Semitism has become part of our culture to the point where people don't even realize they're being anti-Semitic. But then there are also forms of anti-Semitism that are completely ignored. There's Islamic anti-Semitism and Arab anti-Semitism, which we see not only in Israel and the Middle East, but in Europe and the United States. There's black anti-Semitism, often relating to radical black Hebrew Israelites and the idea that they're the real Jews. I find that funny sometimes when they find out what being a Jew actually involves, they might change their mind. And then there's what Chief Rabbi Sachs called contemporary anti-Semitism, in the form of anti-Israel and anti-Zionist anti-Semitism. This is where even the existence of Israel, the world's only Jewish nation, is delegitimized as an apartheid fascist state, with all Jews responsible for the actions of its government, real or imaginary. And it's important to say, I think, for the millionth time, that criticizing Israel, or even being anti-Israel in some ways, doesn't mean that you're necessarily anti-Semitic. Not everyone who is in some way anti-Israel is anti-Semitic, but everyone who is anti-Semitic is anti-Israel. And it's usually really pretty incredibly easy to tell someone apart if they're just criticizing Israel or using Israel as a way to hide their hatred of Jews. If they can't stop criticizing Israel for being an apartheid state, or supposedly abusing human rights, or even the fact that Israel labels itself as a Jewish country, but they're weirdly quiet about every single Muslim nation on the planet, or other dictatorships like China, which are keeping millions of Uyghur Muslims in concentration camps right now, then it's a decent bet you found an anti-Semite. But the problem right now is that most efforts to call out anti-Semitism we see, at least in the mainstream, especially from non-Jews and a lot of secular Jews, are usually focused on the forms of anti-Semitism that help them out politically. Democrats will talk endlessly about white supremacist anti-Semitism and then immediately post a selfie with Al Sharpton. But if you're a victim of the inevitable violence that grows like a cancer from all forms of anti-Semitism, does it really matter what kind of anti-Semitism you faced? Does it matter that the victims of the Pittsburgh synagogue shooting were attacked by a white supremacist any more than the radical black Hebrew Israelites who murdered Jews in New York and New Jersey, or radical Muslims who murdered Jews in Europe? No, of course it doesn't. All forms of anti-Semitism are evil, and all forms need to be rejected. That needs to be our starting point for fighting anti-Semitism. We can't fight anti-Semitism until we get people to wake up to the fact that anti-Semitism isn't just Nazis in World War II, or white supremacists walking around with tiki torches screaming, "Jews will not replace us." But now that we really understand that anti-Semitism is a broad problem rather than a politically convenient problem, it's also crucial that we understand what isn't anti-Semitism. Because if the label of anti-Semitism is used incorrectly, then it becomes easy for real anti-Semites just to hide. Think about what's happening with certain negative labels in recent years. If everything is racist, sexist, homophobic, then nothing is. The same could happen with anti-Semitism. So we all know, I'm sure, the Jews in the room, that one family member who sees anti-Semitism literally everywhere they look. I think that's an extension of really the same victim mentality a lot of Jews have become used to, but also the outcome of a society that values being a victim in the United States. That's what makes Israeli Jews so different to basically everyone else, the assumption of victimhood and almost the embracing of that victimhood. Being a victim isn't something anyone should seek out. Too often, this manifests itself, into people assuming something is anti-Semitic, even if it's not. There are some examples where people will see something, usually on social media, and it'll spark an immediate frenzy. I think Jamie Foxx is a good example. So in case you didn't see it, Jamie Foxx posted a message on Instagram which read, "They killed this dude named Jesus. What do you think they'll do to you? #FakeFriends, #FakeLove." And people lost their minds. A Jewish news company called A Wider Frame called it horrifically anti-Semitic, and he was slammed on social media for his supposed anti-Semitism. And then he deleted the post and apologized. He wrote, "I want to apologize to the Jewish community and everyone who was offended by my post. I now know my choice of words have caused offense and I'm sorry. That was never my intent. To clarify, I was betrayed by a fake friend, and that's what I meant by they, not anything more. I only have love in my heart for everyone. I love and support the Jewish community. My deepest apologies to anyone who was offended." So I had a problem with this, but not in the way a lot of people did. Sure, it's nice that Jamie Foxx clarified his message, and yes, his post did make our Jewish spidey sense tingle a little bit. That doesn't mean he's necessarily guilty of anti-Semitism. Something is broken when people see a message that didn't even mention Jews and choose to fill in the blanks so they can cry anti-Semitism. Jamie Foxx wrote, "They killed Jesus, what do you think they'll do to you?" He could have been talking about the Romans or Pontius Pilate. If anything, it's kind of anti-Semitic to assume he meant Jews. Yes, the idea that all Jews are collectively responsible for the death of Jesus, who was also Jewish, is an anti-Semitic trope. But people chose to see that in Jamie Foxx's message. I know we live in a world where you have to react now, have to have an opinion now, have to destroy someone now. But it's also fine to pump the brakes, take a moment, and ask someone what they mean, especially if they weren't clear in the first place. In this case, I'm only talking about examples where it's not obvious what someone is saying. Kanye West calling for DEFCON 3 on Jewish people over and over again. Jesse Jackson calling Jews Hymies or New York Hymietown. Al Sharpton calling for Jews to pin their yarmulkes back and come over to his house to fight. I don't think we need much of a clarification there. He literally said that, by the way. It's wild. But if we leave no room for distinctions between obvious anti-Semitism and potential anti-Semitism, then we are only pushing people away who could be allies in the fight against anti-Semitism itself. That's also why we must leave room for forgiveness. Back in 2021, there was an NBA player for the Miami Heat called Myers Leonard, and he was recorded on a Call of Duty game using an anti-Semitic slur. He immediately apologized, and he said that he didn't know what the word meant. He was suspended, fined $50,000, and didn't play basketball for years afterwards. He was basically canceled. Should he have been? There are two reasons why I think we need to leave some wiggle room for mistakes. Not necessarily just for anti-Semitism, but all forms of accidental bigotry. So first, let's look at this from a pragmatic point of view. If the conspiracy theory is that Jews control literally everything, including cancel culture, it's not the best look when people are canceled unnecessarily. Doesn't mean it's right or wrong, but that doesn't mean we should give all anti-Semitism a pass, of course, but canceling someone for accidental anti-Semitism doesn't exactly help our cause. But second, I think far more important, is punishing mistakes a way to help our society grow closer? If we don't allow room for mistakes, for honest apologies, for growth, then we breed a society that rewards sticking to your guns, good or bad. And if we don't apply this standard fairly, which we really don't, then the people who have the power to cancel are the ones who control society. And by that, I mean Democrats. But maybe if Myers Leonard was, say, better at basketball, like Kyrie Irving, then none of this would have really mattered and his anti-Semitism would have been forgiven much more quickly. And finally, we have to understand that the label of anti-Semitism is being weaponized itself to damage the fight against anti-Semitism. Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Jamal Bowman, Cori Bush, Pramila Jayapal, they're actively spreading anti-Semitism, again, masked as just being anti-Israel. And they're constantly getting away with it. How? Well, first off, they have the mainstream media in their pocket, the mainstream media that Jews apparently control. But they also get away with their constant anti-Semitism because they're experts at redirecting. And it's this redirection as Jews we need to be prepared for. So when they say, yes, but what about far-right anti-Semitism? The answer is, why can't we fight two forms of anti-Semitism at once? If you care about all kinds of anti-Semitism, you can't be distracted. When they say, what about Donald Trump's anti-Semitism? Do what they hate the most and throw down some facts. Make them talk about Donald Trump. Make them admit that he is, without a doubt, the most pro-Israel and pro-Jewish president in history. It's true. It's because of Donald Trump that we were finally able to witness peace agreements in the Middle East between Israel and multiple Arab states that just years before wanted to wipe every Jew off the face of the planet. Peace agreements morons like Barack Obama and John Kerry said could never happen unless we gave radical Islamic terrorists everything they wanted. It's because of Donald Trump that the American embassy was moved to Jerusalem, acknowledging the obvious fact that Jerusalem, not Tel Aviv, is the capital of the Jewish state. Again, something president after president promised to do, never did. His daughter is Jewish, his son-in-law is Jewish, he has Jewish grandchildren, he's lived in New York and Florida his entire life, which is about as Jewish homeland as it can get. He's done more to protect Jewish people than the entire Democratic Party, certainly. And yeah, sure, it's not good that he met with Kanye West and Nick Fuentes once, even though Kanye West, a crazy person, brought Nick Fuentes, another crazy person, along, and Trump says he didn't know who Nick Fuentes was. But if you think this one accidental dinner, which, yes, was bad, erases all the actual work Trump has done to combat anti-Semitism, and you also think it's fine to suck up to Al Sharpton, Louis Farrakhan, Cardi B, Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, and every other openly anti-Semitic Democrat who would happily turn their back on a Jew being beaten in the street or cheer as Israel is wiped off the map, you don't care about Jews. But that leaves one final question before we head to the Q&A. How do we get to a point where anti-Semitism is more than just a political football? Well, it's up to us to follow this toolkit. Don't look to politicians to end anti-Semitism or keep us safe or fight our battles for us. They don't understand anti-Semitism. They don't care about anti-Semitism. Take responsibility for yourself and your community. Educate yourselves on the true breadth of anti-Semitism. Understand the differences between real anti-Semitism and fake anti-Semitism. Pause and ask people to clarify before really falling for the left's trap of identity politics and online shaming. Leave room for forgiveness when people make mistakes. And finally, talk to people. Don't be afraid to talk about anti-Semitism. Don't be afraid of being Jewish. Don't be forced into the background of our own movement. At its root, anti-Semitism is a conspiracy theory that's built on nothing but ignorance. And the only treatment for ignorance is education. We'll never reach people like Ilhan Omar or Al Sharpton or Louis Farrakhan. They have far too much to lose, having built really their entire careers on hating Jews. But we can reach the thousands, if not millions of people who absorb what they say without even realizing how wrong, how dangerous, and how evil their beliefs are. Thank you so much for listening. I'm looking forward to taking any questions you might have.
Thanks. So I'm just curious what your thoughts are on the foreign aid that goes to Israel. Do you support it? Do you not? What's your opinion?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think quite often it's dismissed. I think a lot of people don't want to have that conversation with any nuance. I think every foreign aid is based on tax dollars. So we have to come from a position of, is this doing something that is worthwhile for the American people? The whole power of government is built on the idea that it's their money, not our money. Every time we send money to Ukraine, it's like we're doing some great thing. They're literally taking money out of your pocket, sending it to Ukraine, probably with a few bits going to the Biden family on the way. And so I think we need to be able to justify money going to any nation, whether that be Israel, Ukraine, any other places. I think money going to Israel in order for it to defend itself, and I think it should be defense-based. I don't think we should be, say, doing what we're doing in Ukraine and supporting their economy. That's not our job. I think foreign policy has room for supporting people who either share our values and are trying to promote those values elsewhere, or are, in a very pragmatic way, a buffer so that they deal with the bullshit overseas rather than us dealing with it. The fact that Israel is fighting a lot of our battles, we should be helping them out with that. Like, even if you're not Jewish, that is true. If you want radical Islamic terrorism to stay away from the United States, having Israel fighting it tooth and nail, because they have to on a daily basis, helps in that fight. Has nothing to do with Judaism. That has nothing to do with even Israel as the center of the Jewish or the Christian world. And so it makes sense for Jews and Christians to want to support Israel for historical reasons, for faith reasons. But even if you're an atheist who doesn't care about that, just the fact that it is keeping people safe, it literally is keeping people safe, it is keeping nations like Iran suppressed, it's doing a whole lot of good that money in Ukraine is not doing. And so I would support money, but like all money that goes overseas, it should always come with an expectation of it is doing something for us. You know, we're not a charity organization ultimately.
Thank you. Good question.
How relevant do you think modern liberal race politics are in the current very derogatory view of Israel and its actions with Palestine? Because I've always thought that a huge part of at least the current vehement anti-Israeli views from the left currently, divest, sanction, those movements, I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that Israel has begun to be seen as white and the Palestinians are seen as brown, and this is a form of oppression or imperialism. What are your thoughts on that, and how do we approach that?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of two things. I think left-wing anti-Semitism has always been based on classism, whether that be skin-based classism, wealth-based classism, what family you're in. If we look at the anti-Semitism of pre-revolution Russia and even post-revolution Russia, the same kind of thing happened. Now that we live in a world where, especially in the United States, class isn't much of a thing as wealth and skin color, because people are obsessed with keeping skin color alive. Like, it's the most meaningless thing. It's like walking around separating people by hair color. It's utterly meaningless. But people are obsessed with keeping that alive. Anti-Semitism has morphed into that model. And so that's one side of things. If you have anti-Semites always trying to keep up with the times, and so they can take advantage of the fact that stereotypically Jews are wealthy and powerful, and a lot of Jews have white skin, even though white supremacists would certainly not believe that we are white. So shocking, Jews don't have a home. How unusual is that? And so there's an element of that. There's also an element, though, that especially radical left-wing politics usually aligns with a lot of organizations like the Palestinian movement, because it's a very easy way to move a lot of money. It's a very easy way to try and take down a system while pushing the idea of victimhood, because that's really the Palestinian lie, is that they are victims. Even some of the examples of the professional watch list Jake showed earlier, complaining about justice. Like, how many wars do you have to fight? How many times do you have to invade someone else's country, have your ass kicked, and then still claim you're the loser, that you are the aggressors here? But they perpetuate this sense of victimhood. Victimhood is the really ultimate currency of our time. And so those are, I think, why the Palestinian movement has become ingrained in the left-wing movement. I don't think it's because they necessarily care about Palestinian people any more than anywhere else. I think it just helps them push their narrative. Jews are powerful, Jews are rich, Jews are white. And so that's just a way to fit in with the modern times.